Running Sentences presents Tangled in a Criminal World. Part 3. The Royal Court and Trouble. Micha tries to settle into the royal court to listen for anything and everything that might be going wrong. But the thing is, trouble tends to follow him about, and, well, he soon finds himself dealing with such things. This story is written and narrated by Micha. It is a work of fiction, so any names, characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, situations, characters, businesses, events, and/or fictional businesses, characters, events is purely coincidental. Copyright 2024, Micha. All rights reserved. The small chambers he'd been provided were more than enough for Micha as he sat down on the bed. A trunk with his new clothes had already arrived and sat in the corner next to the bureau. The whole thing felt rather odd and off to him. Why had the king and queen given him chambers in the court, and right after being given some chambers at Lord Quad's house? It's an odd way of doing things, but who is he to questioning the reasonings? A knock on the door interrupts his train of thought. Enter. With a click, the door opens, and in marches a neat-looking man, no younger than him, but in a pressed and cleaned military blue uniform, one with no medals adorning it. Good afternoon. I've heard that we had a new guest, and I figured I should greet you before you get lost in the crowds. Are the crowds that bad here? Some of the worst. They swallow up people and you don't hear or see them again for another couple of months. I am Otto Schreiber, by the way. Pleasure to meet you, sir. I'm Rexon Breeze, and I'm under the watchful eyes of one of the lords here, so I'm not sure it's good to be seen with me. Yet, anyway. Oh, we're all under some watchful eyes. It's no big deal, really. Come, let me introduce you to some of the others around here. Otto signaled that they should leave the room, which Micha wasn't sure about. Alas, he had nothing else to do other than unpack or sitting around here, and neither of that sounded like fun, so he rose up. The walks to the Grand Court took only a few minutes, which was a bit of a surprise to Micha. He'd expected that getting anywhere in the castle would take a while. This, though, was a nice change of perception, as he took in those high ceilings and marbled-looking columns that shot up to the colored and tinted glass that made up the roof, his own steps echoing about the chamber as they moved through it. This is the grand courtroom, where a lot of parties happen. The Queen likes to hold court here, the King not so much, says it echoes too much. I agree with him, but anyway, here are a few people to meet. Nice people, I hope, Mr. Otto? No one here is entirely nice, no. They're all trying to make ends meet for their own goals, and I'm sure you are as well. It's all the game we play. Micha stopped looking around as they came up to a group of 4 people, each of them wearing fancy clothes that were of different colors and lots of lace and some leather and everything very nice looking. He recognizes, though, that they were the colors of the smaller royals from the area around here that used these colors to signify who they were. Otto held out a hand and pointed towards the nearest, a young lady who couldn't have been more than 13. It was hard to be sure, though, and he wasn't in the mood to try and guess such things. This here is Lady Allura Type, and this is Lady Temperance Valerie, and the man there is Henry Crabbe of House Blue, which is part of his name, yes, don't ask about it. And finally, the man over there is Frederick Copro, 3rd Earl of something or rather. The 3rd Earl upon the land of Tyne and Sorrow. Micha was quick to introduce himself as Rexon, and made a few handshakes here and there, mostly taking this chance to get a feel for these people and how much danger they might be to him. Each of them gave off that sense that they would turn on him in a heartbeat if they got the chance and needed him for something, so no friends were to be found here. So what does anyone do around here for fun? Micha asked, trying to do his best Rexon impression. Drugs, sex, anything that might be of interest to us. The youngest, Allura of them, said this to Micha, which was a bit uncomfortable, but he was not in the mood to judge her. He'd seen a lot of people willing to do a lot of things out on the streets for fun and survival. Here it might be a bit different and more for the fun of things, but all the same in that sense. And for those that want to keep out of trouble?
Micha asked, just to make sure.
Are you a troublemaker, sir? Micha offered a grin and a shrug to Temperance. Shall I take that as a yes?
Temperance asked.
I've seen my fair share of it despite trying to avoid it, so I would recommend steering clear of me if you want to avoid trouble. Why would we want to do that? Mr. Frederick, if you get in trouble you have to leave the luxury, right? You don't want that. Maybe we do. It is quite boring here, and well, we like to get up to things as long as there is promise that it's interesting, and aside from the sex and drugs, and it's rather boring around here. Allura said this with a smirk of a grin on her face, and seemed to be enjoying the puzzled look that came to Micha. I can make no promises on it being interesting and fun. Generally, any trouble that finds me ends badly for me. Who is your patron, by the way? It was Henry Crabbe who said this, and seemed to do an awful lot of talking with his hands. My patron is Lord Quad. The words were out of his mouth before his brain had a chance to kick in, all to tell him that revealing such information might not be the right move 2 seconds too late. If the name meant anything to any of these 5 people, though, none seemed to show it. Well, I'm not familiar with him. Does he do things like businesses or some connections to the royals? As far as I'm aware, Temperance, he has not told me much. He has connections with the families that are around the royal court, I guess, because I'm here. Interesting. Why did he send you here?
Otto piped in.
Well, the game, I guess. I think he wants what everyone else wants here when it comes to sending someone here. I'm not entirely sure, but it seems to be the game you guys are all playing. Information. Well, that isn't as interesting as I thought that was going to be. How disappointing. We have somewhere to be, right, don't we, Temperance? Yes, the library where some lessons will be taught, Allura. Let's go. Forgive me for taking up your time, you two ladies. It was nice to meet you two,
Micha said with a bow.
These 2 ladies then offered nice curtsies, and moved off, leaving just the gentlemen all standing around. It only took a moment for the ladies disappearing before Micha felt both of his arms being grabbed by 2 strong hands. Whoa, what is going on?
Micha protested.
All of the people who come through here have to do a test. Otherwise they're not accepted, Mr. Henry? They can be accepted, but it would take much more time than most have. The test is a much better thing,
Otto announced.
Micha found himself looking from Henry to Otto and then to Frederick. Do the testing chamber, I think,
Fredericks added in.
With a jerk, they pulled him off his feet and towards the side door. Through a bunch of dark hallways and poorly lit spaces, Micha found himself dragged by these 3 men. They all looked to be about his age, but apparently spent time working out since they were having no trouble whatsoever dragging him about. Their little procession came to a stop before a plain wooden door hidden off to the side. Might I ask before we go in, or I go in, or whatever, what exactly does this test consist of? It changes every time. Henry's response was not welcomed as Otto knocked on the door and then stepped back as it swung outward towards him. There was no one there to greet them, as Micha found himself roughly pushed through the doorway, which then slammed shut behind him. Having had just the moment, he managed to catch his balance before going too far into this circular-looking room. It was a good thing he caught himself as well, since there was a rather deep-looking hole in the middle of the room, and it took up quite a lot of space. fuck me. Micha didn't like the look of this, or the fact that the door behind him was locked as his hand grabbed at it and shook at it. There wasn't room for much, and he was wondering, was this really a test, or was this bullying, or what kind of test could this even be? Jump down a hole, survive whatever was coming up it?
None of the answers that come into his mind were all that great.
Hello? 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 His voice echoes about the place for a moment, coming back to him. Other than that, there was nothing going on, so he sat down and moved to be near the lip of the hole so that he could get a better view of what was down there. A pitch-black maw of nothingness greeted him as he sat there and looked at it. I was told there was a test to be done here, and I'd rather get it done and over with. A wave of pressure seemed to shoot up out of the hole, sending Micha tumbling backwards to avoid getting hit by it as he felt it come screaming up. In a snap, he moved to close his eyes as he rolled away, but when he opened them up again, this circular room was no longer in front of him. Now it looked more like a wide-open forest that goes on and on. Not trusting it, though, Micha grabs at a handful of what should be dirt, only for nothing to come away in his hands. A loud cackle of a laugh echoes about the space. Yeah! Hello, who is there? Just an old hag who makes the world go around. How nice. You're the tester of this test? Well, yes and no. That depends on you. Okay, or how would an illusion depend on me? It's all about what you see and what you believe in. Magic might be strong in you, or it might suck you to the pits of despair. Micha began to stand up, making sure his feet felt like they were on steady, solid ground. Nothing here felt right, and he couldn't see this person with their voice echoing about the place. So if I imagine you, then I'll see you? No, but it's a nice thought. I actually exist, and am watching you from above. He looks up, but sees only heavy tree foliage blocking much of his view. How can you see anything if I can't see you? It doesn't matter. Your test is about to begin. I thought it was already going. What do I have to do? What do you think? With a shrug, he takes a few steps back, towards the hole, carefully feeling for where the edge might be. His foot finds it, and the empty feeling under his foot makes his stomach lurch. This is the way, right? I can't tell you anything. It's a self-guided test. What you do is your choice. Survival is about what you want to try and pull off. That's a great help, and I say that sarcastically in case you don't know sarcasm. With that, he steps forward and lets himself plunge forward, falling past the forest and ground before him. With a splash and a painful shock, Micha hits some water, deep water from what he can tell, as he felt like he went down at least a few feet. His eyes opened after the shock of it, only to see a bleak-looking darkness below him. When he swung around trying to pump his arms and legs, there was a little light, making his heart pound fast in fear as he tried to go up and out or figure out where he was. It only took a moment for him to break the surface and gasp for air, and to look about. There wasn't much other than a starry night, which shouldn't be there, and lots of water all around him. How is this a test, and are you still there, weird voice? I'm here, watching your struggles. As for why the water is there, that is a question for yourself, as I've pointed out. Micha snarled at the answer, since it didn't give him much to go off of. And then he took in a breath, since getting angry wasn't going to do much for him either. Why water? That's the question. Why would your mind think of water?
This voice said.
Magic-wise? No idea. I don't have magic. That you know or are aware of? Fine. If I have to guess, it's because water would cause me trouble. I always attract trouble.
Micha offered.
Oh, interesting. And what does water not like? What kind of question was that? Water likes everything, even fire, which, if there was enough of it, it could put out a fire.
Instead of saying that, he decided to
close his eyes and think about himself elsewhere. If he could control this space, then it should be possible to get out of here, and he wouldn't have to think about whether or not water or something else was blocking him from leaving. A moment of concentration, and when he opened his eyes, he was still floating on the water. I don't have a good answer to that. Only those that don't believe in themselves would say that. Clearly, I'm not the type of person who believes that they can change anything then. That's your problem, and you better hurry, otherwise you'll start to sink. And fail the test, which, all things considered, doesn't sound so bad. About that. I can die during this stupid test. This is not all just in my imagination,
Micha said worriedly.
Well, there is potential of that happening, yes. The haunting voice of this discombobulated, ladylike creature was getting on Micha's nerves. I didn't agree to any of this.
Well, that is too bad for you. The test is in control of what goes on.
No. You said that I control this test, and now you're saying that I have no control over it? Which is it? Unfortunately, there was no answer from the voice, leaving him just bobbing in the water. Micha waits a few more seconds, just in case, and once sure that there was going to be no response, he began swimming forward. He couldn't see anything in that direction with the dark sky above him, but he went that way. Minutes dripped past as his arms grew tired and things remained quiet aside from the occasional splash of water, as still as it was. Even his efforts to kick and paddle through the water really didn't make all that much noise. It was even sort of dampened. The only thing that was changing was the tiredness of his body. Tess, do you have anything to say for yourself? He wasn't expecting a response. All he really wanted to do was yell out and make himself feel a little better
about this test.
It didn't work as he floats about, now giving up on swimming. Only you can change things, cried the voice. Shut up, old lady. You said I had control, and then didn't have control. Which is it? Limited control, maybe if you concentrate. And if I have any magic in the first place. Again, there was no response to his comments, and he shook his head and shut his eyes. All he needed to do was wish himself away from this, right? Or something like that. His mind sharpened and concentrated on being back in the room he'd been shoved into, with the hole in the middle of it. Deliver me back to the start. Deliver me back to the start. His words were a whisper, a mantra upon a wish with little hopes of anything being delivered. Yet, when he opened his eyes, there he stood back in the same room, its circular shape all too welcoming to him. Micha found himself sitting heavily down on the cold stone floor with a sigh of relief. Well, congratulations, you've managed to pass the test. A test? How many are there?
Micha sputtered and asked.
Well, quite a few, but for now. There was a click and the sound of the door opening behind him. Micha took only the second to turn around and look to make sure that it was what he was hearing. The door he'd come through, at least that's what he hoped it was, had opened. He, though, doesn't trust it, as he gets to his feet. Does this lead to some sort of other test, or am I free to go? There was once again no response to his query. Frustrated by the lack of communication, he wanders to the door, kicking it a little bit further open to see what is beyond. There was a regular-looking hallway, and the collection of gentlemen from before stood there with their arms crossed. Not exactly the people he wanted to see, but they were a bit better than any strange voice that was coming from somewhere. His steps drew the attention of the group, who look over at him as he steps out, each of them with their eyebrows raised. That was rather quick. I guess, Otto, but not nice at all to deal with. No test is nice to deal with, but it is good to go through and get it over with. Why, Frederick?
Micha asked as he looked over to the man.
It helps establish balance in the royal court, those who can't survive and those that will cling on. He looked doubtfully over at Henry, and then back to Frederick, and then back to Otto. The voice said something about this being a test for magic. Somehow this was not just a test to show that he could survive in the royal court by strength or whatever.
Micha thought to himself.
You believe that, Mr. Henry? Of course. I went through it and barely survived what it had to offer. By the way, each experience is special, as we said, to the person, so there's no point to telling us all about your little adventure. That was fine by Micha. There really wasn't anything to tell, anyway. He jumped down a hole to a bunch of water and then transported himself back? It didn't make much sense, and the more he thought about it, the more his brain felt like it was getting a headache where thoughts should be. Come now, you probably are hungry after your ordeal. We'll continue our little tour of this place. Keep up and don't get lost. Do a lot of people get lost, Frederick? All three shook their head yes. A bit of circling about and through a bunch of fancy-looking hallways with everything clean and tidy, and these ones actually bright and airy, as well as fancy and expensive looking, from the finest of looking fabrics to the woods and stones used. Eventually they came out into a kitchen space, which was filled with plenty of spices and nice smells coming from it. The cooks and servants all scurrying about as they came in and pushed them to the side. Hey, don't treat us like that. You can't simply elbow us out of the way. Henry's declaration was promptly ignored by the cooks. Henry, this is their domain. I think this is the one place where they can do so without a problem, Otto said. A servant stopped before them with their hands on their hips, looking like she was expecting them to leave, but said nothing at the moment. Our friend needs some food, miss. Can you get something for us?
Frederick requested.
Why would I do that? You lot are coming in here at the wrong time of day. You always provide us some food,
Otto said.
Times change, as do the rules. There is a new rule that food isn't allowed outside from certain hours. So scoot and go away. Surely you can make an exception for someone that is newly arrived, though. No, Mr. Henry, I cannot. Now please get out of here and let us do our work. She moves to shoo them away, which they then do, with Micha's stomach grumbling in protest at all the nice smells. It was way too nice to leave without trying anything, but out they went. Micha managed to get out a weak protest before the door closed on him. Is there anywhere we can get some food, because now that you've mentioned it?
But with the door now shut in his face, that cut off that.
A short while later, they found themselves at some side chamber with a few foods put out for people to snack on. There was some sort of meeting going on, but Micha was distracted enough not to care as he grabbed some food, then tried to sneak out as quietly as possible, since he was the only one sent in here. He got about a few steps before someone cleared their throat. Excuse me, what are you doing? Me?
Micha said, trying to sound innocent.
Yes, you. Do you think rabble are allowed to wander the castle and take whatever they like? I'm not rabble. I've been invited to the castle to be a part of the royal court under Lord Quad. The kitchen is not serving food at the moment, so I'm doing what anyone would do. Finding your own, that is rabble to me. Well, you shouldn't do that, and you can't do that.
This man snarled at Micha. But I did do it, Micha replied.
The man who'd stopped him now approaches, drawing themselves up to their full height, which seemed to stretch pretty high up. It was Micha figured a tall height and not something massive, but at this moment, and with the man in front of him, well, tall was tall. Who are you? My name is Rexon Breeze. It's what everyone's calling me lately, and as I said, I'm under the protection of Lord Quad. You think he will protect you here? Micha had thought about offering his hand to shake, but between the food in his arms and the attitude, probably wasn't going to happen. Instead, he decided to take a bite of the bread in his hands and grin at this figure who was demanding so much and giving so little in return. There was the sound of footsteps, though, approaching from behind the man, so Micha peeks around them to see a young-looking woman, girl, maybe a little older than a girl, a teenager, perhaps. She was coming up to them. Jacob, we have other things to worry about. No, we do not. I will not have people of the court stealing food. He looks like he needs it. Let it go. We are dealing with important matters. The man spins on this young lady, turning his anger and frustration on her. You do not get to order me around, Aurora. You are not your mother and have little say in the matters that affect things. I may not be my mother, but I certainly can speak for her on this occasion. We have more pressing matters than food when there are enemies trying to bring the end of the reign of this king and queen. Micha felt his ears perk up at that. Had he accidentally wandered into a spot where he was supposed to be? It felt all too fortunate if that was the case, and he probably also couldn't
Stick around in the first place.
Thank you, miss. You're welcome. My name is Aurora Salinas, and I too am one of the hangers-on at the royal court. He nods and backs away towards the door, only making it a few steps before the man's attention was back on him. Do not think you've escaped, Mr. Breeze. Your actions will be brought up to the attention of the higher-ups. And we shall deal with it then. But for now, I suppose goodbye, sir? Micha slips out the door before anything else can be said to him or aimed at him. There were more raised eyebrows from his little group of associates as he returns with the goods. They grabbed stuff from his arms, and with questions in their eyes, but they refused to say anything. Are you three trying to get me in trouble or kill me or something? First that test and then sending me in to get some food from a private meeting? No, we would never, Otto protested. Well, we would, but not intentionally, Henry added. Otto says never, Henry says unintentionally, and I, Frederick, will say, of course. To be a part of the royals, you need to survive the little games we play. Great, so this is all a test of survival?
Micha said rather wryly.
Pretty much, sir. Shall we go explore some more, now that you know what we can and cannot get lost in? Sure, Otto, sure. Micha's exhaustion was quickly catching up to him. A little maneuvering by the group found themselves outside on the grand grounds of the castle. The green grass extended for quite a while, with a few hedges here and there to keep one in the area. Beyond that, there were also a few gardens, though, thanks to the seasons, it appeared mostly dead, and beyond that, a heavy grove of trees. Welcome to the grand grounds of the castle, as we call it. The stretch of grass can be used for practically anything, and generally is. Look, as you can now see,
Fredericks announced.
A group of soldiers were marching onto the grass and breaking into two groups. They drew on their swords despite having pistols and rifles and began practicing their sword work. Micha watched for a few minutes and then turned to move on since it was just the sight he didn't really care about, and to keep moving. But he found himself coming to a stop, as now there was a ringing bell going off nearby. What is with that bell? First call for dinner. The higher-ups get first dibs, then it goes down the line until it gets to the newest arrivals. I guess you'll have to wait for the fourth bell, Mr. Rexon.
Unless I sneak in, right, Henry?
It is an option, but you'll get in trouble. Micha glanced to Otto, and sing-song tone gave him a headache. I've been in trouble ever since I've met the lot of you. It is quite fun to see what we can and can't get away with you, though. Keeps things interesting, newbies. Micha shook his head at Frederick as they'd begun marching him across the grand grounds, walking towards a building of the castle, jutting out to the side with two grand doors. Micha figures that would lead them to the dining area, but he wasn't sure he wanted to break so many rules on the first day. Normally it would be fine, since he simply was going to run away and find some place to hide, and the streets would hide him well. But here, that didn't feel like much of a choice, especially since he probably would be discovered. I'm not so sure I should, gentlemen,
Micha finally said.
Nonsense, we'll cover for you. You just have to go in. No, Otto, I doubt you will, and I doubt that you go in at the first bell, the lot of you. You're here to get rid of me, aren't you? No, we wouldn't do that. Micha pulls himself away from the group, eyeing Henry and then the others, carefully as he does, trying to listen to them. The three gentlemen, if he wanted to call them that now, were looking at him mischievously, like this was in fact their plan to get rid of him. I think I can wait, since I just did have something to eat. No, that won't last long,
Otto said.
By the time you get served, there'll be little left to tide you over. And think of all the food that you'll be missing out on. Otto, Frederick, and then Henry had all made their comments with
little grins.
Just showed that they really were interested in getting him in some sort of trouble. Thank you, but a lot of you can go first. They paused at this, none of them willing to take that next step to prove that they could go and eat. In fact, they all looked a little nervous and began moving back towards him. What's the problem, you three? Aren't you going to go eat? No, well, as you pointed out, we did have some food, so we can wait. No need to rush, and of course, the first dibs system leaves lots of good food. Micha shook his head at Henry, and then sat down to wait to see how things went, and when these gentlemen would finally go in for dinner. Sadly, he saw he wasn't going to get the chance, as two stormy-looking men with breastplate armors were rapidly approaching them. In a few moments they would be inundated with probably a mundane conversation, or worse, accused of some crimes. And he'd been so looking forward to avoiding trouble, at least for a day. These two guard-looking men then came to a stop in front of them and looked about until their eyes met Micha. Are you Rexon Breeze?
One demanded.
Yes, I am. He silently wished he wasn't, though, since the name sounded silly, and he wished he could change it at this instant. But it was already in everyone's mouth, so there was little he could do about it at the moment. Your presence is requested in the dining room, and only your presence. Who asks for me? The King and Queen. We will show you the way if you will follow us, please. It was nice that they were being nice about this. He didn't like it, though, since it meant that something bad might be about to occur to him, or that he committed some sort of sin and crime that needed to be addressed already. If there was one thing he was sure of, it was that he probably had not broken a record for getting thrown out of the castle. There were always stories about first-time visitors stepping one wrong step and being yanked out just as they'd gotten in. How true those were, though? Micha rose to his feet and dusted himself off. He came into the grand dining room that was shining with lanterns and crystal chandeliers that were reflecting light all over the place. On instinct and to protect his eyes, as they adjusted to so many reflections, Micha put his hand up to block the view. The guards marched him off towards the center table in what was a rather empty room now that he tried to look about. He'd expected noise and much life or merriment going on. Instead, it was dead quiet except for scrapings of a fork and a knife against plates. "Your Highness and Your Highness, the young gentleman in question." "Oh, good, there's a new rat in my castle." Your Highness?" The words caught a hold of Micha and made him fearful of the king. They sounded soft and nice, but many words sounded that way, when in reality they had a lot of bite and menace to them. Micha glances towards the king for a second, still trying to adjust his eyes, then quickly realizes he might want to offer a bow, and does so. "At least you have some manners, although it took you a moment to remember them. Where does Lord Quad find you fools, and why does he think it will be a good fit for my royal court? Don't answer that, it is rhetorical, and I don't care to hear your opinion at the moment. Do you understand?" the king demands. Micha looks up and moves his jaw, about to respond, but unsure if he should do that, so that's just about all he does. The king eventually waves his hand, which Micha took to be the sign that it was okay to talk. "I of course understand you don't want me here," Micha said. "Want you here? You think I don't want you here?" the king replied. Your Highness, you said as much, didn't you?" The king rose from his seat behind a long table, his queen beside him, looking elegant yet with a cold glare directed completely at Micha. The only other people at the table were a few soldiers, each looking rather scarred up from past battles. "I did not say that, and I would appreciate it if you didn't imply such things." As you wish, Your Highness. Would you like me to leave? You seem to not want me, Lord Quad's man, here." "We don't care if you're here. The problem is, we don't really know you yet. That's what this meeting is about, getting to know you." Realization dawned on Micha as the queen spoke up. He'd certainly gotten things off on the wrong foot if this was the case, and he really was just drawing trouble to himself. "My apologies, I am rather new to all of this." "Obviously. Where did Quad find you?" There was a moment's hesitation as he thought about how to answer the king. The truth would be the best option, since the man could probably find out all about him. But was he allowed to speak the truth by Quad? With no instructions on how to deal with this, he fretted for a moment. "The streets and the local houses, Your Highness. I've been looking for a job, and this offer was pushed on me." "You mean you weren't given a choice in the matter?" Still half bowed, Micha stood upright, unsure if he should or shouldn't do that, but he really wanted to respond to the queen, and it didn't matter much at this point, so he met the queen's eyes. "When you are desperate and options are do a thing or disappear, generally one does what they can to survive." "An admirable thing to have to face down, isn't that right, soldiers?" Yes, my lord, it is indeed." Satisfied with that answer, the king turned back to Micha. "What I want from you, peasant, then, is to know what Quad is up to." The question of what to tell and what not to rang in Micha's head to the king's question. No instructions other than listen and keep out of trouble. Fat lot of good that had done him so far. To listen and to see what is going on that might be of interest to Lord Quad. From the look that both the king and queen gave to him, it didn't feel like they thought that was a good answer. It was truthful, though, And if they wanted more, well, then he was really in trouble. That is all he asked you to do,
the king demanded to know.
He wants to know what families are planning against you or with you or anything really that was of interest to him. He didn't supply good answers to me. Oh, suppose another figure playing the game of sides without getting involved, or looking like they're getting involved, might be fine. I suppose it is not so bad, husband, but we need to make sure that these folks come out to our side when the time is right. Agreed, dear lovely Lisa. Now, we have a problem with this young man, with an overly weird name to him. Is that your real name? It's the name I've been assigned to, your highness, my king. The two royals shared an exasperated look between one another, like they should have expected that answer. The queen then stood up, pushing a plate of food forward that hadn't been touched. Would you be interested in helping us out? She said. It wouldn't go against your orders from Lord Quan, by the way, but we want your help in sorting out some things in the court, the king added. Taking a moment, Micha felt that same old sinking feeling that had been following him for the last few days. There was no way out of this, and it was going to cause problems. What can I do for you, my king and queen? End of part 3 of Tangled in a Criminal World. Thank you for listening.